Hello, I present to you my latest novel, Ascension of the Divine Farm, Chapter 16. A Meeting of Shadows. The night before his meeting with the Jade Serpent Sect elder, Wei Long stood on the outskirts of town, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. The stars above were hidden behind thick clouds, and a cold wind swept across the land. The memory of Qianzhao's parting words lingered in his mind. Power is a dangerous thing. It has a way of consuming those who think they can control it. He had seen the truth in that statement. The ancient power he had tapped into during the battle with the Demon Lord was not something to be used lightly. It was unpredictable, and came with a heavy price. Yet Wei Long knew he needed strength. Strength not just to protect the town, but to face the growing darkness he had glimpsed. The spiritual energy in the earth pulsed beneath him, faint but present, as though it was aware of the coming confrontation. The next morning, Wei Long made his way to the Jade Serpent Sect's temporary encampment. The sect had taken over an old mansion near the edge of the town, once the home of a noble family. Now it was a symbol of the growing power struggle between the sect and the townspeople. The gates creaked open as Wei Long approached, and two disciples stood aside to let him pass. The air inside the compound was tense. Wei Long could feel the eyes of the disciples on him as he walked through the courtyard. He wasn't sure if it was fear or respect, but he could tell they were wary of him. The elder awaited him in a grand hall, seated on a high platform. His expression was unreadable, but his sharp eyes gleamed with calculation. Beside him stood Qianzhao, his ever-present smirk in place. "Wei Long," the elder said in a smooth, measured voice. "Thank you for accepting my invitation. I believe it's time we discuss the future of this town and your role in it." Wei Long bowed slightly, maintaining a cautious distance. "I came to hear what you have to say, elder, but I won't agree to anything that puts this town under your control." The elder raised an eyebrow, his gaze never leaving Wei Long's. "Control? You misunderstand. The Jade Serpent Sect does not seek control. We seek stability. This region is growing more dangerous by the day, and without proper leadership, your town will fall. Our sect is offering protection, resources, and knowledge. In return, we ask only for cooperation." Wei Long's eyes narrowed. Cooperation or submission? The elder's smile didn't falter. "Cooperation, of course. But let us not play games, Wei Long. You have a strength within you that even my sect's most powerful disciples cannot match. You've seen the dangers this region faces. The demonic beasts are only the beginning. There are darker forces at work. Forces that even our sect cannot fully comprehend." Wei Long's mind flashed back to the visions he had seen when he tapped into the Earth's energy. He knew the elder wasn't lying about the threats that lay ahead, but he also knew the sect's intentions weren't entirely altruistic. "I've seen those dangers," Wei Long said, his voice firm. "But I don't believe putting this town under your control is the solution. The people here need to grow stronger on their own terms, not as pawns of the Jade Serpent Sect." The elder leaned back in his chair, his eyes studying Wei Long carefully. "You have great potential, Wei Long. With the proper guidance, you could rise to heights beyond your imagination. Our sect could help you refine your cultivation, master the power you've tapped into." Wei Long shook his head. "I've seen what your guidance looks like. You offer strength, but at a cost. You take more than you give." A flicker of irritation crossed the elder's face, but it was quickly replaced by a calm smile. "You're mistaken. The Jade Serpent Sect's only interest is in preserving balance. The world is filled with chaos, and without order, everything will fall apart. We can help maintain that balance." Wei Long crossed his arms. "Balance through control." The elder's smile faded. "Control is necessary when chaos threatens to consume everything. The question is, Wei Long, will you stand with us to preserve that balance, or will you continue down this path of isolation? The power you wield is dangerous. Without proper training, it will consume you." Qianzhao, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "You've felt it, haven't you? The ancient power beneath this land. You can't control it forever. Sooner or later, it will take control of you." Wei Long's fists clenched at his sides. He knew they were right about one thing. His power was dangerous. But he also knew that trusting the Jade Serpent Sect would mean surrendering more than just his strength. It would mean giving up the independence of the town and becoming a tool for the sect's ambitions. I'll find a way to control it on my own, Wei Long said, his voice steady. This town doesn't need your kind of order. We'll forge our own path. The elder's eyes hardened. A noble sentiment, but foolish. You may be strong, Wei Long, but strength alone won't be enough. The forces we're up against are beyond anything you've faced. If you choose to defy us, you'll be standing alone when the real storm arrives. Wei Long took a step forward, his gaze unwavering. I'm not alone. This town stands with me. For a moment the hall was silent. The elder's face remained calm, but Wei Long could sense the growing tension in the room. Finally, the elder spoke, his tone cold. Very well. If that is your decision, we will not force your hand. But know this, Wei Long. When the time comes and the darkness closes in, you will find that standing alone is far more dangerous than you realize. With that, the meeting was over. Wei Long turned and walked out of the hall, feeling the weight of the elder's warning settle over him. The Jade Serpent Sect wasn't going to back down easily. The elder's words were a thinly veiled threat. If the town didn't submit willingly, the sect would make sure they had no other choice. Back in town, Wei Long gathered with Li Cheng and a few other trusted leaders. He explained the meeting, the thinly veiled ultimatum, and the sect's growing pressure. We knew this was coming, Li Cheng said gravely. The sect isn't going to just leave us alone. They'll make their move soon, Wei Long agreed. We need to be ready. The town is stronger than it was, but we're not prepared for a direct confrontation with the Jade Serpent Sect. Li Cheng nodded. We've been building our strength, but we're still no match for their full force. What do we do? Wei Long looked out over the town. The people here were starting to rely less on the sect's resources, but that independence came at a cost. If the sect turned hostile, there was no telling how far they would go. We need more time, Wei Long said. Time to train, to cultivate, and to prepare. I don't want a war with the Jade Serpent Sect, but if they force our hand, we need to be ready. Li Cheng sighed. You think they'll attack us? Wei Long's gaze hardened. If we don't submit, yes, but we won't be alone. There are others in this region who don't want the sect's influence spreading. I'll reach out to them. Li Cheng frowned. Allies? Wei Long nodded. Allies. And with their help, we'll hold the town against whatever comes. The seeds of rebellion had been planted. Now it was time to see how they would grow. Chapter 17. Gathering of Allies. The tension in the air was palpable as Wei Long strode through the bustling streets of the town, his mind already set on the next step. The Jade Serpent Sect's veiled threat had been clear. Submit or face the consequences. But Wei Long had no intention of yielding, not when the town was beginning to thrive through its own efforts. He knew they couldn't stand alone against the full force of the sect. They would need allies, those who were equally threatened by the Jade Serpent Sect's creeping influence. The surrounding region was home to other sects, families, and independent warriors who had resisted the larger factions for years, each cultivating their own power. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the town, Wei Long met with Li Cheng, Lin Mei, and several other key figures. Their expressions were grim but determined. We can't face the Jade Serpent Sect alone, Wei Long began, his voice steady. They're too powerful, and we're still building our strength. But we're not the only ones who've been targeted by them. There are others in the region who see the sect as a threat. We need to reach out to them. Lin Mei nodded, her face serious. I've heard rumors of independent cultivators in the western mountains. Some of them were once part of major sects, but left to live on their own terms. They won't trust easily, but they hate the large factions, especially the Jade Serpent Sect. Li Cheng rubbed his chin thoughtfully. And there are smaller villages to the east. They've been resisting the sect's influence for years. Their warriors may not be as powerful as the sect's disciples, but they're fiercely loyal to their land. Wei Long's mind raced. We'll need to approach them carefully. They won't just join our cause without trust. They'll need to see that we have something to offer, that standing with us is better than standing alone. Lin Mei spoke up. We should divide our efforts. I'll go to the western mountains and try to make contact with the independent cultivators. My family has some connections in that region, and it might help. I'll head to the eastern villages, Li Cheng added. They've always respected strength, and if they see that we're resisting the Jade Serpent Sect, they might be willing to stand with us. Wei Long nodded in agreement. While you're gone, I'll focus on preparing the town. We need to keep strengthening ourselves. We can't afford any weaknesses. The following morning, Lin Mei and Li Cheng departed, each heading in their respective directions with a small group of trusted allies. Wei Long stayed behind, working closely with the town's farmers, craftsmen, and warriors. The cultivation of spiritual energy was not just limited to the body, it extended to every aspect of life. The fields flourished, the blacksmith's forges glowed hot with spiritual fire, and the town's defenses were fortified. But even as the town grew stronger, Wei Long felt the looming presence of the Jade Serpent Sect like a dark cloud on the horizon. The elder was patient, but he wouldn't wait forever. Soon, they would be forced to choose between submission and resistance. Lin Mei's journey to the western mountains took several days, the path winding through treacherous forests and steep cliffs. The cultivators she sought were known for their reclusive nature, preferring solitude over the politics of sects. Rumor had it they were once powerful members of the larger factions, but had left in disgust over the corruption and power struggles. Arriving at the base of a mountain range, Lin Mei encountered her first challenge, a barrier of spiritual energy invisible to the untrained eye but deadly to those who didn't know how to pass through it. She paused, closing her eyes and focusing her senses. The barrier thrummed with power, ancient and strong. Slowly, she found the weak point, slipping through the crack in the energy field. She climbed higher, the air growing thin and cold, until she reached a hidden valley nestled between the peaks. There, among the rocks and trees, were small homes carved into the mountainside, barely visible to the untrained eye. She could sense the power of the cultivators living within, strong but disciplined. They were watching her, waiting to see if she was friend or foe. "I come seeking an alliance," Lin Mei called out, her voice carrying across the valley. "My name is Lin Mei, of Wei Long's people. We share a common enemy." For a long moment, there was silence. Then, a figure stepped forward from the shadows, a tall man with silver hair and a weathered face. His eyes were sharp, and his aura crackled with restrained power. "You speak of the Jade Serpent Sect," he said, his voice deep. "We have no love for them here, but why should we ally with you?" Lin Mei met his gaze, unflinching. "Because they won't stop with us. If they take our town, they'll move on to others seeking to control everything in this region. Alone, you can resist for a time, but together, we can push them back." The man studied her for a moment before nodding. "I am Lei Feng, leader of this valley. We left the sects long ago, but you are right. Their hunger for power knows no bounds. Let us speak further." Meanwhile, Li Cheng's journey to the eastern villages was no less difficult. The roads were rough, and the villages themselves were wary of outsiders, especially those from towns associated with larger powers. The Jade Serpent Sect had made overtures to these villages before, offering protection in exchange for loyalty, but the villagers had always refused, preferring their independence. When Li Cheng arrived, he was met with suspicion. The village chief, an old warrior named Zhou Tian, stood at the head of his people, arms crossed. "You come from the town near the Jade Serpent Sect," Zhou Tian said, his voice gruff. "Why should we trust you?" Li Cheng bowed respectfully. "Because we resist them, just as you have. We don't want their control any more than you do. My people have fought to keep our independence, but we can't stand alone. If we don't unite now, they'll pick us off one by one." Zhou Tian frowned, considering his words. "We've resisted the sect for years. Why should we change now?" Li Cheng looked him in the eye. "Because they're growing stronger. They've been patient, but their influence is spreading. Soon, they'll make their move. If we don't prepare, we'll be caught off guard." Zhou Tian was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "We'll consider your proposal, but know this, we won't be anyone's pawns. If we ally with you, it will be on equal terms." Li Cheng smiled. "That's all we ask." Back in the town, Wei Long continued his preparations. The people were beginning to rally behind him, their confidence growing with each passing day. They had seen the changes, stronger crops, fortified walls, and warriors training harder than ever. The town was becoming a force in its own right, but Wei Long knew that the real test was yet to come. As the sun set on another day, Wei Long stood atop the town's walls, gazing out at the distant horizon. Lin Mei and Li Cheng would return soon, hopefully with allies by their side. But even with their help, the battle ahead would not be easy. The Jade Serpent Sect was watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But Wei Long was ready. The seeds of rebellion had been sown, and soon they would rise. Chapter 18. The Winds of Change. A heavy silence blanketed the town as Wei Long stood atop the watchtower, staring out at the distant horizon. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden light over the land. His thoughts churned like the clouds above, wondering what news Lin Mei and Li Cheng would bring when they returned. They were out there, seeking allies to stand with them against the looming shadow of the Jade Serpent Sect. As the day unfolded, Wei Long descended from the tower to join the townspeople, moving between the training grounds and the bustling marketplace. The people were industrious, strengthening not just their bodies but their spirits. Spiritual cultivation wasn't limited to warriors. Farmers tended their fields with enhanced vitality, artisans infused spiritual energy into their crafts, and the town's overall strength grew in small, tangible ways. The balance Wei Long sought to preserve was delicate. The townspeople had grown proud of their self-sufficiency and their determination to resist the Jade Serpent Sect. But even in their newfound strength, Wei Long knew they were walking a razor's edge. 2 days later, Lin Mei returned from the western mountains, her body showing signs of exhaustion from the arduous journey. She wasted no time and went directly to Wei Long, finding him in the courtyard where he often sparred with the town's most promising warriors. "Wei Long," she called, her voice low but urgent. He turned, pausing mid-motion as he lowered his weapon. "You've returned." She nodded, eyes sharp and focused. The independent cultivators agreed to a meeting. Their leader, Lei Feng, is a formidable figure, and he understands the threat the Jade Serpent Sect poses. They've lived apart from sect politics for a long time, but even they cannot ignore the growing influence of the Jade Serpent Sect. Wei Long wiped the sweat from his brow and gestured for Lin Mei to join him under the shade of a large tree. As they sat, Lin Mei continued, "They'll send representatives in a few days to discuss terms of an alliance. Lei Feng is cautious, but he's willing to listen." A wave of relief washed over Wei Long. This was a critical step forward. "Good. If they agree to join us, it'll be a huge advantage. We need their strength." Lin Mei's eyes narrowed. "But we can't take them for granted. They'll expect equal say in how things proceed, and they won't follow orders blindly. If they sense we're trying to control them like the sects they left behind, they'll walk away." Wei Long nodded, his expression serious. "We'll treat them as equals. We need allies, not subordinates." Lin Mei hesitated, then added, "There's something else. Lei Feng mentioned an ancient site deep in the mountains, an old relic of a forgotten sect. He said there might be something there, something powerful enough to shift the balance in our favor, but the journey to reach it is dangerous. I didn't want to mention it until we had more information." Wei Long's mind raced at the possibilities. An ancient site could hold valuable resources, weapons, or even cultivation techniques long lost to the world. But it was a risk. We'll keep it in mind. For now, the alliance is our priority. As the sun dipped low in the sky on the third day, Li Cheng arrived from the east, accompanied by several warriors from the villages. He looked tired but determined, his weathered face lined with satisfaction. "They're in," Li Cheng said, stepping forward to shake Wei Long's hand. "The eastern villages are willing to fight. Zhou Tian, the village chief, is bringing their best fighters. They've been resisting the Jade Serpent Sect for years, but now they're ready to stand with us." Wei Long could see the strength in the men and women who had come with Li Cheng. Their eyes were fierce, hardened by years of defending their homes. They weren't as polished as sect warriors, but they were tough, resilient, and loyal to their cause. "That's excellent news," Wei Long said, his voice filled with gratitude. "We'll need their help when the time comes." Li Cheng sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly from the long journey. "They've had their doubts, but they respect strength. They'll fight, but we need to show them that we're committed. This won't just be a battle for control, it's about protecting our way of life." Wei Long's gaze shifted from Li Cheng to the warriors gathered in the courtyard, some already exchanging techniques with the town's fighters. "We'll show them," Together, we're stronger than the Jade Serpent Sect realizes. With both Lin Mei and Li Cheng's missions successful, Wei Long called a council meeting that evening. The leaders of the town, along with the newly arrived representatives from the villages and the independent cultivators, gathered in the Great Hall. Lei Feng himself had come, his silver hair catching the flickering torchlight as he surveyed the room with calm authority. Zhou Tian, the village chief, stood beside him, a broad-shouldered warrior with a weathered face and eyes that missed nothing. Wei Long addressed the assembly. We've come together because we share a common goal, resisting the Jade Serpent Sect's control. They've shown time and time again that they're willing to destroy anyone who stands in their way. But if we unite, we can stop them. Zhou Tian stepped forward, his deep voice filling the room. We've resisted the sect for years, but we've always done so alone. This is the first time we've stood together with others. I won't lie, there are risks, but the alternative is to be crushed one by one. Lei Feng's voice was quieter, but carried a weight of authority. We've seen the sects rise and fall, and we've chosen to live apart from their games. But the Jade Serpent Sect's ambition has grown too large to ignore. They seek control over everything. If we don't stop them now, there will be no place left for those who value freedom. Wei Long took a deep breath and looked around the room. We have the strength. We have the will. Now we need a plan. The discussion that followed was intense. Strategies were debated, resources tallied, and plans set in motion. It was agreed that Wei Long would lead the defense of the town, while Li Cheng and Lin Mei would coordinate with the villages and independent cultivators. Lei Feng's people would provide reconnaissance, watching the Jade Serpent Sect's movements closely. As the meeting drew to a close, the sense of unity in the room was palpable. They were different people from different places, but they shared the same goal. That night, as the town settled into an uneasy calm, Wei Long found himself standing once again atop the walls, staring out into the darkness. The Jade Serpent Sect's forces hadn't moved yet, but he knew it was only a matter of time. The winds had shifted. The sect would strike soon, and when they did, Wei Long would be ready. But even as he prepared for the coming storm, the thought of the ancient site in the mountains lingered in his mind. There was something there, something powerful, something that could change everything. But was it worth the risk? The answer would come soon enough. Chapter 19, The Gathering Storm. As dawn broke over the town, the sense of anticipation was almost suffocating. The preparations were well underway. Warriors trained tirelessly, the townspeople fortified the walls, and supplies were stockpiled for the battles that would inevitably come. But Wei Long knew that no matter how ready they seemed, the Jade Serpent Sect had resources and power beyond anything they had faced before. Wei Long stood in the center of the training grounds, watching the warriors spar with a critical eye. He noticed subtle improvements in the way they moved, their strikes faster, their defense more fluid. The spiritual techniques they practiced had begun to bear fruit, and the town's cultivation progress was evident. The fields around the town pulsed with vitality. The crops infused with spiritual energy, thanks to the constant focus on cultivation, and the town's defenses were imbued with protective formations. But all of this might not be enough. I see you're troubled, a voice said from behind him. Wei Long turned to see Lei Feng, the leader of the independent cultivators from the western mountains, approaching. His silver hair gleamed in the early light, and his calm demeanor contrasted with the underlying tension that had gripped the town. Just thinking about what's to come, Wei Long replied, gesturing toward the warriors training in the distance. We've done all we can to prepare, but it still feels like it's not enough. Lei Feng nodded slowly, his eyes following Wei Long's gaze. That's the way of war. No matter how prepared you are, there's always uncertainty. But I've seen your people. They're strong, and they have something the Jade Serpent Sect doesn't. What's that? Wei Long asked. Purpose, Lei Feng said simply. The Jade Serpent Sect seeks power, control. They're motivated by greed. But your people fight to protect their home, their freedom. That kind of resolve is hard to break. Wei Long considered Lei Feng's words carefully. There was truth in them, but it didn't change the reality of what they were up against. The Jade Serpent Sect's reach was long, and its resources vast. And yet, Wei Long said after a moment, Resolve doesn't always win wars. Lei Feng smiled faintly. No, but it does tip the scales, especially when combined with strength. I didn't agree to this alliance lightly, Wei Long. I see potential here. Potential that could rival the power of any sect, given time. Wei Long appreciated the confidence, but time was the one thing they didn't have. The Jade Serpent Sect would strike soon. He could feel it in the air, the way the wind seemed to whisper of an impending storm. Before he could respond, a runner approached, breathless from a long sprint. Master Wei, the young man panted, bowing quickly. Li Cheng has returned. He's brought word from the eastern villages. Wei Long's heart quickened. He had been waiting for this. Thank you. I'll meet him right away. Inside the great hall, Li Cheng stood with Zhou Tian and several other village leaders. They looked weary from their travels, but their eyes gleamed with determination. Wei Long entered with Lei Feng at his side, nodding to the gathered group. Li Cheng, Wei Long greeted him. What news do you bring? Li Cheng wasted no time. The eastern villages are prepared. Their warriors are armed and ready to fight, but there's a problem. Scouts have reported that the Jade Serpent Sect's forces are on the move. They've gathered at their stronghold, and it looks like they're preparing for a major offensive. Wei Long's jaw tightened. How many? At least 100 elite disciples, with several elders leading them, Li Cheng said gravely. That's just what we know. They could have more in reserve. The room fell into a heavy silence. 100 elite disciples backed by powerful elders was no small force. Even with their alliance, the town would struggle to hold against such numbers. We'll need more than just numbers to win, Zhou Tian said, his voice gruff but firm. We've faced sects before, but this will be different. Lei Feng folded his arms, his expression unreadable. They won't attack recklessly. The Jade Serpent Sect values its reputation, and a full-scale war could draw unwanted attention from other factions. They'll likely try to intimidate us first, test our resolve. Wei Long nodded in agreement. We need to be ready for anything. If they're preparing an offensive, we have to strike first. Hit them before they can fully organize. Li Cheng stepped forward. I agree, but we'll need a strategy. Charging blindly into their stronghold would be suicide. That's why we won't attack head-on, Wei Long said, his mind already racing with possibilities. We need to strike where they're weakest, disrupt their plans before they can execute them, and we'll need to take advantage of the terrain. Zhou Tian spoke up. The forests to the east could be useful. We know that land well, and we can lead them into traps if they try to march through. Lei Feng added, and my people can provide reconnaissance. We know how to move unseen in the mountains. If we can keep tabs on their forces, we'll know when and where to strike. Wei Long glanced between them, his resolve hardening. They had a chance, slim though it was. The Jade Serpent Sect may have been stronger in raw power, but their alliance was diverse. Cultivators, warriors, and people who knew how to use the land to their advantage. We'll send out scouts immediately, Wei Long said, standing taller as he addressed the room. We'll gather information, and when the time is right, we'll strike. We're not just defending this town, we're defending our future. The next few days passed in a flurry of preparation. The warriors trained harder than ever, honing their techniques and learning how to fight as a cohesive unit. The independent cultivators moved through the surrounding forests and mountains, mapping out every possible route the enemy could take. Traps were set, and defensive formations were bolstered. Wei Long spent long hours in the council chamber, working with Li Cheng, Lin Mei, Lei Feng, and Zhou Tian to finalize their strategy. Each piece of the plan was designed to force the Jade Serpent Sect into overextending itself, leading them into unfamiliar territory where the Alliance would have the advantage. But there was still the matter of the ancient site in the mountains. Lei Feng had mentioned it in passing, but now it loomed larger in Wei Long's mind. If there was something there, something powerful enough to turn the tide of battle, it could be worth the risk. Late one night, after another grueling strategy session, Wei Long pulled Lei Feng aside. Tell me more about this ancient site, he said quietly. What do you know about it? Lei Feng's eyes flickered with interest. It's an old relic of a sect long forgotten, buried deep in the western mountains. Some say it holds treasures, artifacts of immense power, but no one's been able to reach it in centuries. The path is treacherous, and the site itself is protected by ancient formations. Wei Long's mind raced. If the legends were true, whatever lay within that site could be the key to defeating the Jade Serpent Sect. But it was a gamble, a dangerous one. "We don't have much time," Wei Long said, his voice low. "If there's even a chance that what's in that site could help us, we have to try." Lei Feng studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I thought you might say that. I'll take a small team and lead you there. But understand this, the journey won't be easy. If we go, there's no guarantee we'll make it back before the battle begins." Wei Long's eyes burned with resolve. "Then we'll just have to make sure we do." As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Wei Long prepared for the journey into the mountains. He had chosen a handful of the town's best warriors, including Lin Mei, to accompany him and Lei Feng. They would move quickly and quietly, hoping to reach the ancient site before the Jade Serpent Sect's forces could fully mobilize. But even as they set out, Wei Long couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away. The storm was gathering, and soon it would break. One way or another, everything would be decided in the days to come. Chapter 20, Into the Depths. The early morning air was crisp as Wei Long led his small group into the mountains. The narrow path they followed wound through dense forests and over steep ridges, the terrain becoming increasingly treacherous with each step. Lei Feng, moving with quiet confidence, led the way, his knowledge of the mountains invaluable as they ventured deeper into the wilderness. Behind them, Lin Mei moved with her usual grace, her sharp eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Wei Long had chosen her for this mission not only for her combat prowess, but for her ability to sense danger long before it became visible. The other warriors followed close behind, their faces a mixture of determination and anxiety. They knew the risks of this journey, but they also understood its potential rewards. As they ascended higher, the forest began to thin out, replaced by jagged rocks and cliffs. The wind howled through the mountains, and the sun barely penetrated the thick clouds overhead, casting everything in a dim, gray light. "We should be approaching the first marker soon," Lei Feng said, his voice low but steady. "It's an old inscription carved into the rock, a sign left behind by the sect that once controlled these mountains." Wei Long nodded, keeping his focus on the path ahead. He could feel the spiritual energy in the air becoming denser the higher they climbed. It was faint but unmistakable, an aura of power that had lingered in these mountains for centuries. After another hour of climbing, Lei Feng stopped abruptly. He knelt by a large, moss-covered boulder and brushed away the dirt and vegetation to reveal an intricate carving, a symbol etched into the stone. It was faded with age, but still recognizable as a mark of an ancient sect. "This is it," Lei Feng said, standing and stepping back. "We're on the right path. Beyond here, the terrain becomes even more dangerous. The sect left traps and barriers to keep intruders out, and time hasn't made them any less deadly." Wei Long studied the symbol for a moment before turning to his group. "Stay sharp. We don't know what we're walking into, but it's likely that the closer we get, the more dangerous it'll become." The warriors nodded, gripping their weapons more tightly. They all knew the risks, but Wei Long could see the determination in their eyes. They were committed, just as he was. The path grew steeper as they continued, the air thin and cold. As they moved deeper into the mountains, Wei Long felt the spiritual pressure increase. It was subtle at first, but soon it became a constant, oppressive force that weighed on his body. He could see it affecting the others as well, though they pressed on without complaint. After several more hours of grueling travel, they reached a narrow ledge overlooking a deep gorge. Lei Feng paused, scanning the area carefully before pointing to a cluster of rocks on the opposite side of the gorge. "There," he said. "That's the entrance. It's hidden by the rock formations, but it's the only way into the site." Wei Long squinted, trying to make out the details. The entrance was well concealed, blending almost perfectly into the surrounding stone. It was no wonder no one had been able to find the site in centuries. As they prepared to cross the gorge, the wind picked up, howling through the narrow pass. Wei Long took a deep breath, steadying himself before leading the group across the precarious ledge. The path was narrow, barely wide enough for one person at a time, and the drop below was dizzying. Halfway across, Lin Mei suddenly froze, her hand shooting up in a silent warning. Wei Long stopped immediately, his senses sharpening. He could feel it too, an ominous presence, like a predator lurking just out of sight. Without warning, a surge of spiritual energy erupted from the rocks ahead, and a massive creature leaped out, its body a blur of dark fur and jagged claws. It was a beast, twisted by years of exposure to the spiritual energy in the mountains, its eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. "Watch out!" Wei Long shouted, drawing his sword just in time to block the creature's swipe. The force of the blow nearly knocked him off the ledge, but he managed to steady himself, planting his feet firmly on the ground. Lin Mei was already moving, her twin daggers flashing as she darted in to strike at the beast's flanks. The creature roared, its massive form moving with surprising speed as it swiped at Lin Mei. She dodged gracefully, her movements fluid as water, but the creature's strength was overwhelming. It lunged at her, and she barely avoided its claws, rolling to the side and slashing at its hind leg. The other warriors joined the fray, their weapons flashing as they surrounded the beast. But even with their combined efforts, the creature was relentless, its thick hide deflecting most of their attacks. "This thing's no ordinary beast," Lin Mei called out, her voice strained as she dodged another strike. "It's been absorbing the spiritual energy from this place for years." Wei Long gritted his teeth, focusing his energy into his blade. He knew they couldn't afford to waste time. If they lingered here too long, they risked drawing even more attention from whatever other dangers lurked in these mountains. "Focus on its legs," Wei Long shouted, directing the others. "We need to bring it down." The group moved in unison, their strikes coordinated as they targeted the creature's legs. Lin Mei slashed at its knees, her blades finding purchase in the soft joints, while the others hacked at its hind legs. Slowly, the beast began to falter, its movements becoming sluggish as blood flowed from its wounds. Seizing the opportunity, Wei Long leaped forward, his sword glowing with spiritual energy as he delivered a decisive blow to the creature's neck. The blade sliced clean through, and the beast collapsed with a final deafening roar. The warriors stood panting, their bodies covered in sweat and dirt. Wei Long wiped his brow, his heart still pounding from the intensity of the battle. "Is everyone all right?" he asked, looking around at the group. Lin Mei nodded, though her expression was grim. "We're fine, but that was just one beast. If the site is guarded by more of these things..." "We'll have to be careful," Wei Long said, sheathing his sword. "But we can't turn back now. Whatever's in that site, we need to find it." Lei Feng, who had remained calm throughout the battle, stepped forward. "We're close now. The entrance is just ahead, but be on guard. There may be more traps waiting for us." Wei Long nodded, signaling for the group to move forward once more. As they crossed the final stretch of the ledge and approached the concealed entrance, a sense of anticipation hung heavy in the air. They had come too far to turn back now. Whatever lay within the ancient site, it would soon be revealed. The entrance to the ancient site was a narrow tunnel carved into the rock, barely wide enough for them to pass through in single file. As they stepped inside, the air grew colder, and the spiritual pressure intensified, pressing down on them like a physical weight. Torches flickered in the darkness as they made their way deeper into the mountain. The walls of the tunnel were lined with ancient symbols, glowing faintly with spiritual energy. It was clear that this place had been abandoned for centuries, yet the power that lingered here was still palpable. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. At the center of the room stood a massive stone altar, its surface covered in intricate carvings. On the altar lay a single object, a crystalline orb, glowing with a soft, ethereal light. Wei Long's breath caught in his throat as he approached the altar, his heart pounding with anticipation. This was it, the source of the power they had sought. But as he reached for the orb, a sudden chill ran down his spine. Something was wrong. "Wait," Lin Mei called out, her voice sharp with warning. "Don't touch it." Before Wei Long could react, the chamber shook violently, and a deep, rumbling voice echoed through the air. "You dare disturb the slumber of the ancient?" The ground beneath their feet trembled, and from the shadows, figures began to emerge, spirits of long-dead cultivators, their forms flickering with ghostly light. The guardians of the ancient site had awoken. Wei Long gripped his sword tightly, his eyes narrowing as the spirits advanced. The true test of their journey had only just begun. Subscribe to Sakura Audiobooks. Give us a thumbs up and leave a comment if you enjoy our work. Your support means a lot to us.